and how it merged. And if I want to tell about something about him, he started from Colombia, but he took up music from Siberia. So itself, it is a journey of music and sound and poetry. And I'm directly going to him, and I'm going to ask how it started, how this world music came to him. So Ikaro, if you start with how your journey began from Colombia to Siberia and how you took up the music.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Well, at first I studied philosophy in Colombia, but during my studies I was very, very interested in literature, and especially in texts that we didn't read, that not so common texts. When I finished the university, I wanted to travel. As many people, I thought at first that the main way or the most easier way to travel was studying, also continue on the academical way. So I started, I went to study Russian literature, but I went to a place that changed my life in many senses. It's called Bashkortostan Republic. It's not properly Siberian Republic, it's in the borders of Siberia on the Ural Mountains. And it's a very multicultural place because it's a Muslim republic, and they have they preserve the traditions of the ancient, of the nomadic people. They came from the east. But it's interesting that my first approach to this, I was reading poetry at that point. Many of the poems that are in the book translated and published here were written in that period. So I lived in a residence with students from Korea, and they gave me as a present one flute. It's called the danso, and I really liked its sound, so meditative, so beautiful. And then I thought, oh, this could be nice in a stage or in a performance, like read my poems and make some interludes with this flute. After a few months in Bashkortostan, I knew another instrument that it's called, in Bashkortostan, it's called the kubis or homus, timur homus. Here it's a world instrument in India. You have also this instrument, it's called morchang. It's like the similar like technique, the similar instrument. And suddenly I started to become more and more interested on these traditions, because when you learn an instrument, you start to learn also the culture, the cosmology, and all of these things. And that was like the beginning of the process. Then I learned more Siberian instruments. I traveled. I decided not to continue studying Russian literature. So I just became a traveler, and I started my research by myself. And well, that was like the beginning of this.
And that instrument we were talking about yesterday, that can you show that instrument and can
Yes, I didn't play yesterday. It's this instrument. This is one from Siberia. I have a collection of them in Colombia. This is when I showed this instrument to. I remember to my mother in the internet.
Okay.
I said, "Oh, I'm learning this. It's really cool." And she said, "Oh, it looks like a key." And for me, it became a kind of key because I started traveling with it, and I made many friends with it and connected a lot.
And we were talking about how they perceive these instruments, how they create this instrument, and your perception of these instruments will tell that like they're like animals. And
yes, in Siberia, and I think in another cultures, but particularly in Siberia, these traditional instruments are considered vehicles, like horses. In some regions, in another regions, it's considered a deer. And I understand this because the shamans, for example, can travel into the another worlds and into the another dimensions of existence, using the sound, using this instrument. And also, I understand this because when you play the instrument, the other people also can travel with you to that places. So this is something that I believe, and I really, no, I'm like compenetrated with this philosophy. I think these are really instruments.
And when you went back to Colombia, and how then you reconnected with your own indigenous music, and then after this?
Well, I haven't studied like deeply the traditional music, traditional in Colombia also, as in India we have different tribes, different musics, but I became like recognized there more for use these Siberian elements and from another cultures, like kind of outsider in a certain way. But it has many connections also with different groups. For example, this instrument is also played by a few of our communities in Latin America.
What do you used to play before you went to Russia or Siberia? So what kind of music, what kind of poetry were you into before this?
Well, in terms of music, I grew up with rock and roll, with rock, hard rock. And I was telling you before going here that I went to Siberia to discover this traditional music, but after a few years I came back again with the electric guitar and with these musics, because in Siberia rock it's very popular, it's spread, and they have very good interpreters. Yesterday after my performance, one guy came and told me, oh, in some moments it sounds like metal or something like that. And it's because the throat singing with the electric guitars can make that atmosphere. But anyway, when I sing this, even with the electric guitar, I consider that I'm making something like a ritual in a certain way.
So what's your idea of poetry and throat music? How it mixes together and it becomes something new?
Well, I think it's not new in my perception, like these categories as poetry performance or, I don't know, multidisciplinary studies or something like that. They are like concepts that try to get close to an ancient time where everything was connected. Music and poetry. Music, like poetry is in a certain way music. So if we go to the ancient text, to the ancient chants that we can read now, they have rhyme, they have music, and that poems were performed too. So there was a strong connection between the body, between the words, between the music. So that was my access. My access not was from something contemporary that I want to make interesting or that I want to make combine elements. But no, I just met masters in Siberia that were making like kind of poetry performance, but they are just singing the epics.
So you're telling that it was an original and a very traditional way of music, that it was always there. It's not that it went away.
Yes, I think so, and I think that in like one of my ideas that I have very interiorized is that we are also ancestors of the future epics that haven't been written. So in that way, the instruments that we play now also can be considered, like the electric guitar or even another instruments, can be considered also vehicles of the consciousness.
So you're saying that even the instruments now we play, we have seen playing like electric guitar or the electric, even in the next few years maybe, or maybe 100 years, we are already seeing that digital music is becoming more important, and so even the instrument itself is becoming redundant. People are making music through computer itself. So you think that keeping this tradition alive is important, the instruments, the throat singing, so it doesn't become
Yes, and probably it doesn't depend too much on the instrument, but on the consciousness, on the way I approach to the instrument. Yes, if I take this instrument like in a ritual way, and electric guitar is like kind of new instrument. It has like 70 years probably. Anyway, this music comes from blues, and you know that blues, it's also ancient music in a certain way, an approximation to African sounds with another instruments and other elements. So I think this keep in the essence of this music.
And what's about your exposure to Indian music? You've already told me that you have some experience of Indian music in Colombia. So can you tell our audience that what's your exposure to that?
Well, yes, after I met this instrument, I started thinking maybe I also can sing. I tried to sing before with not so good results on the stage. So I decided to take lessons, but I didn't want to take lessons with an like orthodox, a classical, Western point of view. So I was looking for a person, and I found a teacher, a guru from Kolkata, and she lives in Bogota, in Colombia. She's one of the persons that have spread the Indian music and Indian culture. She's connected with the government also, with the embassy. Her name is Ananda Basu, but she calls himself in a Colombian way Anandita, like in a more like closer way. Anandita Basu, she has been playing over the world, and I started learning very basic things, some paths, some like the basic scales. But for me, it was also the chance to connect with a kind of meditation, because she's disciple of Sri Mataji. So I learned the Sahaya Yoga meditation at that time. And few years later, in 2014, I had the chance to came to Delhi, and I wanted to continue a little bit studying these musics. So I asked her to advise me some master, and she sent me to Mahua Mukherjee, and she's also from Kolkata. And I was with her like 1 month also, singing and learning.
So, Ikaro, I'm very interested to know that you have traveled a lot and you're performing, and how people perceive your performance. They perceive it as a poetry or as a performance or a song. What's the perception of this mode of creation you do?
Well, I don't know. I think we need to ask people how do they feel this. But in my experience, I think it comes from poetry, from the lyrics. When I'm in the creative process of writing a song, it's not so different than when I come to a poem or something like that. And I think this is a working process, incorporating the verses, the spoken word, yes. So, for example, I started to tune my guitar like 2 years ago, experiment with the tuning, looking for a sound that allowed me to play more like the Siberian instruments with an open chord, for example. And in that way, I connect also these traditions, this contemporary and the ancient, in a very simple way. Maybe people can't perceive it at first because it's a guitar. And I use distortion sometimes, but I'm playing in a way closer to the Siberian instruments, for example, to some of them.
Can you play us something?
Of course, yes. Hola, hola, hola. Quizás por esto en el mundo todo canta. Las partituras del silencio están escritas en el pecho de un gorrión. Y donde muere un pájaro nace una piedra, porque la muerte es otra forma de volar. Quizás por esto en el mundo todo canta.
Thank you. That's wonderful. That is really wonderful. And this new music, this kind of thing, I think this will touch everybody anywhere in the world because it's very original and it's very old something. But I have another kind of a question to you. I mean, you are in Colombia. We know that in Latin America, the corporate dilute and the colonialism, so it affected your original indigenous poetry and art more. So how do you connect? How do you see in this time?
Yes, Colombia is passing through very hard times because of violence, because of the narco-traffic, because many situations. And of course, people that lives not in the cities, but in the regions, indigenous people are suffering a lot because the politics of governments usually give privileges to just some groups, as in many parts of the world. So, in fact, it's a resistance to keep alive these instruments, to keep alive these traditions. And maybe, in a certain way, in my position, to take the electric guitar, or to take this instrument that if you feel, you can make some people like want to collaborate with me, like DJs and these things, okay, because it has maybe like this drive or like very electronical thing or something like that.
It can be popular.
Yes, yes, and it's connected. So I think that can be one way to open the consciousness also to the to the young people. So I think it's a process also of education.
So you do this, you collaborate with DJs and these things to make.
Yes, but not like because I want that people likes the way I do. It's like it's the thing that I do, but I understand that new generations can feel like connected with these sounds, and this is a kind of reborning of these ancient traditions. So I think that's one path also to change mind, to change these politics, to educate people, and I think art is a way also to have a better way of life.
And how it is perceived by you told me that you're not into that academical thing of this poetry or art. So how it is perceived in your country that this kind of thing has been taken?
Yes, well, I think it's good perceived because it's something like special, different in many ways, like my history of life. So it's good perceived. But anyway, these sounds are not so interiorized, not so popular. You know, this kind of singing, this kind of sounds. Maybe at first there are people listening to another music, more pop, our reggaeton, for example. I don't know if you listen to this music. It's I really don't like these lyrics, these things. But even in that kind of music, there is something old, ancient. The beat, titu, tu, tu, titu, tu, tu. This kind of beats comes from African music, and they are powerful too. But the thing is the way, the consciousness and the way you used this music. What do you want to do with this? Yes? Art or to control the mind of people, for example? Yes. So
for you it is art, and that is itself is a resistance. As you were saying,
it's a kind of resistance. I think so. So of course it's not so easy to find, for example, places where to play. To establish a conversation with another people that maybe doesn't have this background to explain what are you doing, that because people come to the concert and listen what is he doing, but you don't have always the time to explain, oh, this is throat singing, that is from Siberia, that it's hard. But anyway, the vibration comes from another energies. We are just instruments of the nature, instruments of the spiritual forces. And in that way, I think we have a very special, also like kind of weapon to make the resistance or instrument.
Yes, Ikaro, it's the same thing here. I think the problem you're facing, or this happens all over the world. I think we have the same problem here, that the popular music, there's some kind of music, and the poetry and the new music and this thing, we always gets a very little niche audience. But yes, we have to go on and keep this tradition alive. So I must thank you. Can you please do another one? So before finishing this talk, can you give another?
Okay. I will sing. I think it's called Shloka. This taught me my master from Kolkata, Mahua Mukherjee. And one interesting thing that she was very interested also that I can make very low tunes. So I want to play this honoring her as my teacher and for you, and with all respect, of course. Bhuni Mangalam Mangalam Udita Mangalam Mangalam Surya Mangalam Mangalam Chandra Mangalam Mangalam Vayu Mangalam Mangalam Agni Mangalam Mangalam Shiva Mangalam Mangalam Deva Mangalam 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 Babatu 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 Bhuni Mangalam Mangalam Udita Mangalam Mangalam Surya Mangalam Mangalam Chandra Mangalam Mangalam Vayu Mangalam Mangalam Agni Mangalam Mangalam Shiva Mangalam Mangalam Deva Mangalam Mangalam. Thank you.
It's wonderful. That's wonderful, Ikaro, and I sincerely hope that your journey will continue with the world music and world poetry. And like what we are doing here, I think this Poetry Confluence is all about that bringing the music, the sound, the poetry, and everything together to have a new experience. And I really sincerely hope all the best for you. Thank you. Thank you, the audience.
Thank you. May I invite Choiti Mitra on stage and felicitate Subho Maitra, the moderator. Thank you. Thank you, Ikaro. And